Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About It, a podcast created by The Fuse, an outreach initiative within the College of Applied Studies and recorded on campus at the Elliott School of Communication here at Wichita State University. I'm Bobby Berry.
And I'm Jessica Newman, and in today's episode, we are going to be discussing undergraduate research and service learning. So I think we often hear about the importance of student involvement and extracurricular activities, but today we want to specifically emphasize academic enrichment activities like research and like service learning. At Wichita State, these types of opportunities are available and encouraged as early as the student's freshman year. And we're going to hear from a couple of students who are very involved in these opportunities. And we're also going to speak to a few faculty who are involved in these as well.
So joining us today is Dr. Rhonda Lewis, who is a professor and a chair of the Department of Psychology. And also Dr. Lewis is a service learning faculty fellow here at Wichita State. So welcome, Dr. Lewis.
Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
And also joining us in this first portion of our podcast is Dr. Beck, who is an associate professor in chemistry department. In addition to, she will be sharing her experience as a faculty director of first year research experience, or FIRE. So once again, welcome, Dr. Beck.
Good to be here.
Thanks for being here, yes. So Dr. Lewis, let's start with you. We hear the term service learning kind of quite a bit in higher education, but for those who might be unfamiliar, could you just start by defining what that term means and discuss a little bit about what it looks like on our campus?
Yes, I'm happy to. For us, service learning, I just wanted to give you the definition for it, for how it's defined here at Wichita State. Service learning at Wichita State University is an experiential learning method that integrates community service with instruction and reflection to increase student civic mindedness and build community capacity. We try to link curriculum and academic content, relevant service, and reflection. And of course, here at Wichita State, we have a hyphen between those two words, service and the learning, because the service we provide in the community for students, and the learning is tied to the academic curriculum that's in the classroom. That's what we mean.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That was news to me.
Yeah. So what does this look like in practice, and also what kind of value are you seeing that service learning components bring to our students?
Oh my gosh, I just think it just brings so much to the student because, students just kind of get in the classroom and they just kind of get stuck there. But if you can provide that experience in the real world, I think it just gives the student a richer experience for learning. And the faculty is allowed to tie that what they're learning in the classroom to the real world, and they can have an impact in the community as well, because I think if you're just in the classroom, you don't understand how those principles that they're learning in the classroom can make a difference in the community.
Right,
that they're
there's
serving.
Application there.
Exactly.
And I think that's such an important piece. It's about how do we find ways to actively engage our students and let them see the impact that they can have not only on their campus, but in the communities that they're ultimately going to go out and serve. And I think community looks different depending on the lens that you hold. But I think ultimately, when we talk about recruitment and retention, what better way to retain a student or even get a student by allowing them to explore their interest and see how those interests can impact and affect real people in real time.
I'm so glad you said that, because service learning has been identified as a high impact practice in terms of retaining students. Yeah. And we want to make sure that Wichita State is seen as the place where students want to come.
Absolutely.
And be, we're an urban serving university, so we want to make sure that, Wichita State is seen by students as, not just being a university on the hill. We're not really on the hill, but not being an ivory tower, but really a place that has an impact in the community that we're serving, surrounding us.
Absolutely. So speaking of gaining experience as an undergraduate, so Dr. Beck, what is FIRE, and when was FIRE started here at Wichita State?
All right, so first year research experience is what FIRE stands for, and that comes from, we don't want to necessarily say freshman year because we have a lot of transfer students at Wichita State University, and so we want it to be open to all students who are on campus for the first time. And it actually started in the fall of 2017. I actually had an undergraduate student who was working in my lab at that time, and she realized that she was kind of unique in that she had sought out a research experience as a freshman, and that it was kind of an intimidating experience for her to, walk up to a faculty member and say, hey, I want to do research. And so Abby Jorgensmeyer, she was in the Honors College, and she decided she wanted to try to make this easier for other freshmen or first-year students. And so she did a lot of research. She actually did an internship through the Honors College to do this research and to put together the whole program. So it wasn't just me, but I was helping her along that route. And we actually went on campus at Oklahoma University, who also have a fire program. And in 2018, we had like a contingency of faculty from Wichita State that visited the fire program at Oklahoma University and got a lot of feedback from the faculty there and the students that had participated there. So then it wasn't until the fall of 2018 that we actually recruited our first fire students, and they started working in the spring of 2019 was the first class of fire students.
Wow. So when you think about the time that has passed and kind of this almost coming to fruition based off of student engagement and students' level of curiosity, if you will, when we think about research, there seems to be quite a huge impact and emphasis on STEM specifically with undergraduate research. Can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of, these STEM-related fields and why we're seeing such a huge push for STEM fields to really have more front and center in when we think about research?
Yeah, I think it goes back to both the workforce development, so there's a lot of STEM careers that are opening up, but I also think it has to do with this disconnect that students may have, and I had this myself, of thinking about what types of careers or what you can do with science. So a lot of students really get excited about chemistry or biology or whatever they learned about, but what they're learning about is all the stuff we already know. And what's really exciting in STEM fields is all the things we don't know or understand or haven't figured out how to put into practice to help improve human health or different products that we use. And so I think in the classroom a lot of times, even in our laboratories that are associated with classes in the STEM fields, students don't get to experience that aha moment of discovery. That's really the exciting part of STEM. And so I think, by doing research, you get to see the other side of STEM fields.
Absolutely.
That's not like the historical perspective, what we already know, right?
Right. And that's one of the things that I have always, I wouldn't say struggled with, but even when we think about all aspects of higher education and we think about making it accessible to younger folks, the generation that is currently in high school, and how do we attract them? And I think it's about how do we make these things sound cool? And I think ultimately that has become higher education's task, is how do you take what some are seeing as, oh my gosh, I can never do that, or it just sounds so complicated and so complex, but no, we do this stuff every day in our weird ways in our everyday lives. It's just about how do you then tap in and say, no, this level of curiosity, let's see what that looks like. Right. This desire to improve the community that you live in, what does that look like in an educational setting? And it's really relevant, but I think our job has been tasked with how do we make it appear that way to these folks in high school as well. So Dr. Lewis, back to you specifically with your role as a service learning fellow. What drew you specifically to want to be a fellow?
Well, I was doing service learning before service learning was cool. It comes from my field. I'm a community psychologist by training. And so when I first became a faculty member, I didn't know it was really called service learning at that time. I put a service learning component in my class already. I wanted the students to be matched with a community partner, and they had to do a service component in my class. And so when this opportunity came to be, I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to apply for that. And I wanted to do that and be a service learning fellow. And I said, this is great. So now I didn't have the reflection piece, which I think is a key component of service learning, because you have to reflect on what you learned from the service learning part of it, because you've got to link it to curriculum, academic content, the relevant service, and the reflection. And so that's got to be part of it. And so I think people have to understand that piece. They keep forgetting the reflection. And so, but I already had the service component piece in my class. And so I was already doing it. And so I wanted to just, say that relevance to the students is really key, and that students really do want to make an impact in their community. But at first, they're kind of hesitant a little bit because they're like, I'm already busy. I'm already committed to so many things. But once they do it, they absolutely love it. They love making an impact in community-based organizations and making an impact in the community. But that's what really drew me to it in the first place. And I love it, and I love being a part of it and creating more scholars across our colleges. And so it's been really fun.
Awesome. So something that I love that WSU has put together is the Service Learning Showcase and providing a way for students to not only get these opportunities, but then show them off and highlight it and talk about their success. So
yes.
Could you first just talk a little bit about what that showcase is and what it looks like, and then maybe highlight one or two memorable student submissions that you've seen?
Oh, yes. The Service Learning Showcase is, is one of our highlights that students get to submit their posters and submit their lessons learned from their experiences. And so we have mindfulness in the classroom that they've done with community-based organizations. It's tutoring. It's painting murals for art in the schools. It's mentoring for Boys and Girls Club. But one of my favorite, most memorable is our physician's assistants. We had like 16 students all posing in front of their poster, and that's just a wonderful memory for me. But one of my favorite ones is the work systems class in engineering. One of the work systems classes actually did an infrastructure project for the Kansas African American Museum, and you would think, why would that be such a great example for engineering? But I mean, we're trying to get students to get out there and do a project for the community, but it really built that capacity building, which is part of our definition, to really help build the capacity for these organizations. And the students absolutely loved it because they could make a difference in one of the community-based organizations, and they really did love that. And they actually won one of our service learning awards for that day. So because we have an overall service learning award, we have a community impact award, we have an innovation creativity award, and we have an award for community leadership. So we really do appreciate the students showcasing what they have learned as a part of the service learning showcase.
Wow,
so
that's
cool.
really cool. Yeah. And Dr. Beck, we'll turn it back to you for this next one. The university has truly embraced this idea of undergraduate research. And what do you believe the value of undergraduate research is?
Well, Rhonda already brought this up about high impact practices, HIPs, yes. So in addition to service learning, undergraduate research has been shown to be one of these high impact practices. So she stole my thunder there. And it's been shown in many studies across the nation that it improves the quality of students' experience, their learning, their retention, their success. Yeah. And this is especially true for underserved students. And so, it not only does it benefit them in learning more about potential careers and getting excited about their field that they're going into by actually engaging in it directly, it does show that it helps retain them in their major and helps their graduation rates are improved. And so all those things benefit, the student.
And as in addition to some of the things that we talked about with Dr. Lewis about showcasing memorable service learning showcase submissions, can you tell us about maybe one or two memorable undergraduate research projects that have been a part of FIRE?
Yeah, so FIRE is kind of fun for me. Being in the chemistry department, I'm usually only exposed to the research going on in chemistry or biology, but FIRE brings in students from across campus in engineering and in psychology. And so one of the fun ones for me was learning about a project that one of my first year FIRE students did. His name was Siddharth Pathuk. And he's in aerospace engineering, which I usually never see an aerospace engineering student in my class. But he participated in a program or a competition that was called Invent for the Planet. And he had some teammates, and they came up with a solution to the problem of hail damage to airplanes. And so my simplistic memory of what his design was, it looked like those inflatable rafts that they put down from the airplane when you're going to have to evacuate a plane. Yeah. But it looked like those kind of inflatable things that would protect the whole structure of the airplane. So the wings, it would have these inflatable kind of flaps that would go up on the plane. Wow. And he actually won first place for that design. And another student in chemistry, I'll go back to chemistry. This was from last year's fire students. Gary Cicerello works in the lab of Jin Wang, who is a new faculty member in the chemistry department. And he actually discovered a never before created compound that is copper and phosphide and barium. And he actually has a publication where he's the first author, which is... And he got this from work he did as a freshman. So graduate students in the lab are probably jealous of this guy. But he's a super hardworking student and is still working in that lab. And so it's kind of fun to see students get really wrapped up in this. And this becomes their whole world. Like, you know, they're in the lab not because they have to be there like you do for class labs, but because they really love doing that work.
Wow, that's fascinating. I think it's really cool to be able to see, like you said, these are high impact practices. So to hear these stories from both of you about those high impact that these folks are having, they're winning awards, they're getting published. So I hope that people who are listening to this are really understanding the value, that it doesn't matter what major or what field you're coming from. It doesn't matter your race or ethnicity. Research, service learning impacts any and everybody. So I really appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, and something that I am hearing both of you talk about these student experiences is that these students are working with faculty in a very different way than you would just in like a classroom setting, right? So, Dr. Beck, would you mind talking to us about some of the benefits of having faculty involved in some of these research experiences with our students?
Right. I mean, we're kind of selfish too, right? So we benefit from having these students. And the reason I wanted to start a first-year program was actually the first undergraduate that approached me when I just arrived on campus. Was a freshman, nursing major. All of my colleagues would have probably turned him away because he's not a chemistry major, he's only a freshman. But he was an amazing component to getting my lab up and running. He stayed in my lab for 4 years. I'm still in touch with him. So, I mean, he helped get my lab organized. He had been a carpenter before, coming to college. For 9 years, he'd been a carpenter. So, I gained so much. And if you can get these students when they're first here, then you have 4 years with them. And so you really develop this deep project that they get super involved with, and then you get to see them go on. I think that's also the exciting part. So Abby Jorgensmeyer that I talked about helped me start the fire program. She's now in a graduate program here at Wichita State University. And so it's that investment that you can make in really altering a student's future, but also the benefit it brings to your lab. This is a 4-year-long commitment maybe from those students to working on a project in your lab. Oftentimes, students do this for pay, but oftentimes they're in the lab, many, many hours beyond what they're getting paid for, getting credit for. So I think there's a lot of advantage to that new perspective they bring to the research as well. And they turn out to be people that, go on to do great things, may become inspired to continue their research in graduate work or as professors. And so I think for me, that's exciting just to kind of see them at the beginning of their career.
Excellent. And service learning certainly falls into that same kind of spirit of collaboration, and then sort of building off of that, meeting the needs of the community around us. So one question I think that a lot of students have, and I specifically remember myself having as an undergrad student, is wanting to give back, but also understanding this word of service learning, but not really knowing how to bridge the gap between giving back in service and academics. So what advice or how would you talk to a student who was unsure about that?
Yeah, I would just say, I know students are really worried about their finances and making money. And I just want to tell them that they can really give back and have an impact on people. And when you give something back, you gain a lot in return. And so my advice to them is the person you help today may be the person that helps you tomorrow.
I love that.
And it is like paying it forward. And an added bonus that I find from service learning is that sometimes those students that actually work in those community-based organizations often hire them. So
yeah.
I often found that when we placed the students in those community-based organizations, often hired them on. So I know Wichita State often talks about being an economic driver. Mm-hmm. Well, those are some of the benefits, but they also learned about, prevention, collaboration with these community-based organizations. So I really do want the students to know that they can make an impact in students' lives, planting community gardens, all of these other things, working with students in, our USD 259 or other places, but they really can, make a difference and, potentially find work after school, which is what most students want to do.
Right.
So they can do both things simultaneously, which is really awesome, I think.
I have, and just from hearing both of you talk, I have 1-2-ish more questions that I'm going to maybe throw you guys.
Everyone get ready.
Well, one of the things, Dr. Lewis, that you said that just kind of jumped at me, this whole notion of self-reflection, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and this is my personal question to you, is what has the self-reflection looked like for you in being able to have this experience as a faculty fellow for service learning and seeing these students grow? What has that been like for you?
Oh, it's been so powerful because as I said before, they often are so resistant at first. Like, I don't have the time and you want me to do what? And then when I see them then become advocates for service learning and they tell other students about it, I'm just so in awe. And then they begin to make the connections with whatever you're doing in class. They begin to make the connections about, oh my gosh, we should help this person, and oh my gosh, what I gained. And so one of the best examples that I can give is when I've had students, do service in the schools and they've helped being able to tutor other students, and when the students are looking for them and they want to give, before COVID, pre-COVID of course, but the students would give them hugs about, oh my gosh, you helped me learn how to read. That is so powerful because the teacher sometimes would not be able to give those students those one-on-one, being able to read and learn, but those college students could go in and help the student read that was having trouble, and that student was able to have that impact. That's so powerful. And then for the student themselves to be able to reflect on, I made a difference in a child's life. That's powerful to me, and I can see that student grow from that. It's just awesome.
Absolutely. And Dr. Beck, for you, where do you hope that FIRE will be on this campus? 3, 4, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, where do you hope that this goes?
Well, actually, it's good timing to ask that question because I'm writing a grant right now. So FIRE is, I don't have money to support the students. And so I've seen a couple of students who got into the FIRE program and then realized the time commitment that research takes. And that, I know a lot of our students work, and some of them work almost full time. And so doing research on top of their classes, on top of working, on top of taking care of family is just not possible. Yep. And so the grant I'm applying for right now from the NIH will hopefully be able to support those students so that they can do research and not have to work outside of doing their research. Right. So it would pay them a stipend, it would pay their tuition, and it would pay for the research supplies and travel for conferences. It's actually the only time I've seen an NIH budget that doesn't have a cap on it, because you have to justify, but it tells you these are the things that you can pay. And so we're hoping, this grant goes in, We'll see, but that's my vision, and that actually will carry them. It will pay students for up to 3 years, so it could be their sophomore, junior, and senior year. So FIRE would be kind of the entryway in, and then select students would be able to stay on and get funding to support their ongoing research. And the aim of the grant mechanism is to also make this a pipeline to increase diversity in biomedical PhD programs. And so that would be kind of the really long-term goal for those students.
Well, my fingers are definitely crossed. You guys get that grant. Last thing before you guys leave. So if anyone is listening to this and they are curious on how to be involved in service learning and or FIRE, Dr. Lewis, first, where would you direct them to find out additional information?
Oh, definitely go to our website, www.wichita/servicelearning.edu. And definitely go.
And
to our website.
For you, Dr. Beck?
We also have a FIRE website, and it's going to be the wichita.edu/FYRE. It's housed under the Honors College right now, and that's kind of another future direction is that there is some talk at the university, I don't know if I'm supposed to be talking about this, but of having an office for undergraduate research and service learning, I think would fall under that as well. So hopefully things won't be necessarily housed in these weird places, and it'll make a little bit more sense.
Well, we just want to say thank you both for coming and taking time out of your busy schedules to be here with us today. So on behalf of Jessica and I, once again, we want to say thank you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so the next portion of our podcast will be focused on our students. So up first we have Aaron Fader, and joining us a little bit later will be Micah Self. So I want to take time to say welcome, Aaron.
Yes, thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we're going to do a little rapid fire question with you really quick, and we just want to get to know you a little bit better. So can you tell us your name, your major, and your academic classification? So pretty much your junior, freshman, sophomore, any of those things.
Sure. My name is Aaron Fader. I am studying chemistry, biochemistry. It's not a double major. It's one major. That's a common misconception. And I am at junior standing as of now.
Nice.
Awesome. And would you just start by telling us a little bit about your experience with undergraduate research here at WSU and kind of what you've been up to and what that looks like?
Yeah, of course. So I've actually had the pleasure of being involved with undergraduate research really before I started school here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I participated in the Summer Research Institute with Dr. Heidi Bell and Dr. Gary Brooking. That's a program funded by an NSF LSAMP grant. And so that's just 4 days in the summer for incoming freshmen or transfer students of just really an intense pilot study of learning how to design a research question, do a lit review, refine your research question, and then actually collect data and present an analysis, all in 4 days.
Wow.
So that was kind of my first, Crazy. That was my first exposure, and that program kind of feeds into the first year research experience, which occurs in the spring semester for first-year students, and that's fronted by Dr. Mariah Beck, which pairs students with faculty who have volunteered to take on first-year students to kind of expose them to what a semester-long research project looks like, even if it ends up like you don't even get to data collection or you attempt data collection and it fails. That happened to me. But you still, you present your research about the area you're investigating, why your research is important, your method, so on and so forth. And so now, after FIRE, I've been working in Dr. Mariah Beck's lab since then on the same project.
Wow.
Yeah.
So all of these experiences are before you, well, not all of them, but before you even started college, you were learning how to write a lit review, how to, do all those things.
Which is brilliant.
I mean, I was so behind comparatively.
Yeah, I was really lucky too. The SRI flyer came in an email just out of nowhere early in that summer. So I was like, this is interesting, because prior to that I had, I think, next to zero interest in research.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And offline, Aaron and I were talking a little bit, and I think one of the things that I have appreciated, because working in human performance studies prior to, I got to see Dr. Bell planning this Summer Research Institute, and I got to hear in the early stages of kind of when they were putting it together. And I was just like, the concept of being able to take the what seems to be the complexities of research and being able to articulate that to folks coming that are still in high school, and being able to take away some of that and demystify and make it not as scary and almost make it seem cooler. Like, you get to investigate an issue. I mean, think about, this is what we do every day. Like, every day is research. We investigate problems. We use Google. We do trial and error. Like, will this pair well with this? Whatever. I mean, research is found in so many unique ways in our everyday life, and so I just really like the concept of having a institute that is able to do that with with young folks, I love the idea, honestly.
Yeah, and show how accessible it can be, because you're absolutely right. It's like the second you label it research, people go, I don't know how to do that, So talk to us a little bit about what has drawn you to your particular area of research experience that you've had, or kind of how you got interested in it.
Right. So all of high school, I was interested in biology and kind of what's going on in the human organism and how cell pathways interact, things like that. And chemistry was a bad experience in high school. I was it never went well.
Me
and
too.
so I kind of,
I never took it in high school.
I had kind of sworn it off. I was like, never again, not touching chemistry. So I came into school as a biology major, and I had remembered from SRI we did lab tours, and so when you do the chemistry lab tour, Dr. Mariah Beck actually takes you through a tour of her biochemistry lab, and I was just like a kid in a candy store. That was like the coolest thing in the world, and now I'm like playing with those tools every day.
I love that.
Absolutely
That's
bizarre.
amazing.
And so that kind of convicted me towards changing the major to biochemistry and kind of just jumping in head first. And so really what drew me to the work was just that wonderment, that the enticing part of it that just drew me in, because it was like, this stuff's interesting to me. I really, to get in the details of it, anyone listening would be like, this guy's insane. That's not interesting. So it's very niche, I think.
And so specifically, talk a little bit about what you've had the opportunity to do in the lab with Dr. Mariah Beck and what you guys have been working on lately.
Yeah, so the umbrella investigation in our lab is called Actin Dynamics. Actin is a protein found in all of your cell cytoskeleton. And so we're investigating a couple of what are called actin binding proteins, which will take individual monomers of actin and polymerize them, put them in a chain together. And that aids cells in cell motility, moving them around the body. And so we're specifically investigating two of those proteins called pallidin and myopallidin. We're investigating how mutations in pallidin contribute to the pathogenesis, or the occurrence of the development of cardiomyopathies, irregularities in the heart.
Yeah.
And with pallidin, we're investigating how mutations could contribute to, overexpression of pallidin could lead to hyperpolymerization of actin, which could lead to metastasis of cancer.
Wow.
So like last year when I was kind of new to the project and I heard like cancer, I was like, cancer research, like this is it. But I was telling Bobby offline that what you realize as you go get into the research is that it's so small scale, and it takes forever to do small scale data collection, and sometimes it goes poorly, and so really it's just like weeks and weeks of work for just a little bit of progress. But
they all lead to something bigger.
Right,
Wow.
Exactly.
And it can take forever, right? I mean, it can take a very long time. And I'm curious, and I'm gonna throw you a curveball here.
Uh-oh.
But what does the process of data collection for this particular research look like? So how are you collecting your data? Like, what is that process like?
So data collection starts with trying to achieve the mutation in the wild type, or it's called wild type, the original gene. So there's no mutations. This is healthy DNA. It codes for the healthy protein. That's where we start. And so then we design what are called primers, and we put the primers in a little tube with the template and a bunch of other buffers and solutions. And we can use a machine that runs through several temperature cycles to incorporate that mutation into the plasmid. And so then from there, what we want to do is transform that DNA into a bacterial E. coli cell that can overexpress the protein, and then basically we can harvest those cells, and then from them we can break them open and harvest the protein, purify it, and then we can start data collection.
Wow.
So
It's incredible.
Yeah, and the whole process of trying to achieve the mutation, it's been described to me, and I describe it to others as a black box, because you can't tell what's happening. It takes like 1,000,001 different troubleshooting techniques to figure out what's been going wrong the whole time.
Wow.
So I've just now actually begun data collection on one of the mutants for myopallidin, the one we're investigating in relation to cardiomyopathies. And so that looks like, to keep it simple, it's you take the purified protein myopallidin mutant and you put it with actin that's not polymerized, and then once you've let it kind of co-incubate and you separate it because you spin it down at very high speeds, you can run it on a gel with gel electrophoresis and pull the proteins through. And you can still, like, this is still over my head because I'm still learning how to do this. You can use a software to quantitate how much protein is bound to actin, basically.
Huh.
So really what we're doing is we're investigating how the mutations influence the binding activity with actin. So how those mutations might hinder or, maybe increase the binding activity.
Wow. And he's a junior doing all this fun stuff.
I love watching his face as he's
Me
describing
too.
it. I feel like I can see him like thinking about it in the way that he does it, and then trying to, for lack of a better term, dumb it down for us a little bit. Like, okay, how can I explain this that it makes any sense to someone who's not in my
We had
area?
actually been talking about that. Part of what I've learned through all of trying to present my research to a general audience versus a scientific audience is that jargon barrier about whether or not they're going to understand the words that come out of my mouth. And so it's not against you guys.
No,
I'm just conscious of the fact that I have spent quite a bit of time in the lab now, and I understand a lot more. So it's
absolutely.
I mean, we see that in lots of industries.
Absolutely, I think
tech jargon for me, and all kinds of things.
Jessica will say stuff to me pertaining to this stuff that she does over there with the computer, and I'm just looking at her like, okay.
And then you go doctorate speak on me, and I'm like, I don't know, man. Everyone's got their own expertise, right?
So, Erin, when you're thinking about, the work that you've done and, how we talked about how research just has so many benefits, how do you hope that the research that you're working on impacts the Wichita community and beyond? I mean, I see the links there, but I'm curious on what your hope is and your intention is.
Well, I would really hope that, this project sees the fulfillment of kind of what its goal is. Like, if we can identify how mutations occurring in within individuals, how that influences the irregularities occurring, that would be amazing. But we're just so small scale now that really what I look forward to is that the positive experience that I've had with research causes me to turn outward and share that with everyone else and explain to people how awesome this is and how great of an opportunity it is that I have to do this at such an early stage in my career. It's really setting me up for success.
Absolutely, 100%. And then with that that self-reflection, if you were to take a step back and, as you're nearing the end of your junior year, right? So technically
I still have 2 more years.
Yeah. So if you kind of take back and look at the things that you've had the ability to accomplish and or to be a part of, looking back at all this, what have you learned about yourself during this research process, and how has that research impacted your college experience thus far?
I would say that it's really exposed to me my curiosity. Mm-hmm. It's really important to ask questions, especially when you're involved in research, and it's important not only to look at your results and say, oh good, we got results, something showed up, but how about what does this result mean? And even before you get to that, you have to think, just close your eyes and imagine, what am I expecting this to look like? And then you look at it, and then you notice the differences, you notice the things that kind of need your attention. And so my curiosity muscle has grown a lot through this process. And just in terms of my overall college experience, it has breathed life into that, because otherwise I would just be a mindless drone going from class to class. And I really just... This is something I look forward to. I'm spending quite a few days a week in the lab working and juggling classes, and so it's very life-giving to have a goal to look forward to and work towards beside graduation.
I like that.
Wow, I love that talking about curiosity. To me, that's so much of what I try to teach my students is to get curious and to start, go beyond just this is what the syllabus is telling me to do. This is how many points, and it seems like adding in that research component is a perfect way to really hone your curiosity and learn how to work with that curiosity in a way that helps, propel you forward, so to speak. So I think I know the answer to this question, but we'll ask it anyways, and then see if there's anybody additional that you'd like to add on. I'm curious about the people who have kind of mentored you or helped work alongside you. So I think Dr. Beck probably is the one that comes to
Absolutely.
mind. You want to talk about her and then maybe add on if there's anybody else that you'd like to mention as well?
Yeah, of course. So Dr. Beck runs the FIRE program, so she kind of teaches the entire class that meets once a week. But she took me into her lab as a freshman, as a first-year student, and I was just invited into a project that was going on. I was paired with a grad student. I'll give a quick shout-out to Rachel Klausmeyer. She introduced me to the lab. She introduced me to lab techniques and protocols and things like that, like really trivial things I end up doing every day now, but without the exposure to that, I'd be lost. But Dr. Beck's kind of influence on me is that she is a very involved mentor in my life, of course in terms of academia, in that when I'm writing research proposals or I'm writing applications for grant funding or I have to write a paper for like research in chemistry, that class. She and I are collaborating on what works, what doesn't work, what am I missing, what could be better, and just in general, she's always concerned about kind of my academic well-being, about where I'm at, and as you can imagine, in a semester that's condensed and has no built-in break, it's a burnout semester. It's absolutely bizarre. So Dr. Beck has been a huge influence in my undergraduate experience, and I want to give a huge thanks to Dr. Heidi Bell and Dr. Brooking and Jesse Rayburn, the honors advisor. They are kind of the spearhead team on SRI, and that without SRI, I don't think I ever would have found this. It's been such a positive experience that I've actually gone back to SRI to serve as a peer mentor for the incoming students, and I'm back on that team again this year. So they built the platform that I was able to launch off of. So without them, I wouldn't have had that. So.
And SRI being Summer Research Institute, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
Just making sure we're clear on that, just in case. Well, that's amazing. Thank you. So one kind of final question for you. As we, recruit students to Wichita State, or to any university for that matter, a lot of students say they want research experience. A lot of people say that. But most, at least in my experience, have no clue what that's going to look like, no clue where to start, no clue how to get that experience that they say that they want, or even what it might look like if they could get it. So your experience, wouldn't necessarily look like somebody else's experience versus the next person, but what advice would you have, or how would you suggest that incoming students or students who are already here, how would you suggest they get started in that, jump into the waters of research and see what they can come up with and do?
Yeah, of course. So obviously a program that feeds you into research isn't always available, and maybe it's competitive. You can't get into a program like that. But I think the one word that comes to mind when I think about getting involved in research is assertive. You have to assert yourself.
Okay.
You have to find a field that interests you, maybe to start with a department. You're interested in biology research, say, and then you're kind of doing your own research and you're investigating what faculty is doing what of that interests you. And then it's as plain and simple as being bold enough and being assertive enough to say, hello, this is my name, I'm in this class with you, maybe you're not, and I'm really interested in the work you're doing in your lab. Is there any chance you have an opening for me, maybe just a shadow, however that ends up going. But I think that's a lot of research opportunities are lost because students are sitting back and just kind of letting the opportunities go by. But like, to be assertive is it's the best thing you can do for yourself.
Yeah, put yourself out there. That's great. Thank you.
Of course.
Wait, let me ask that question.
Yeah,
so
I want to know.
5 to 10 years from now, Aaron, what do you want to be doing?
Oh man, I want a doctorate. I want a PhD,
okay,
for sure. When I was younger, I was kind of confused by what graduate school looked like. I thought it was a natural progression of undergraduate, a master's degree, and then a PhD. But when I learned that you can go from an undergraduate degree to a PhD, I was like, we're just going to fast track it.
Might as well, right?
Yeah.
Right?
So I've got some time before I have to start thinking about applying for grad school, but that's kind of where I want to be.
Would you ever want to teach, or would you just want to primarily do research now?
I don't think research in the industry really attracts me right now. That might change because during a doctorate program, you're going to end up doing some TA-ships, and so I think that would really be the turning point. So when that happens, if I was like, teaching's not for me, I could pivot, but where I stand right now, I think to teach and conduct research at a research-intensive university. That'd be it for me.
Perfect.
That's awesome.
So yeah, thanks for letting me think that last question.
I'm glad you tossed it in there.
All right. Well, once again, thank you so much, Aaron, for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I do want to say, just real quick, if I misspoke about anything that happens in the lab, defer to Dr. Beck.
Got it.
It's all her. So
she's going to call you right out if you said something wrong. All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, of course.
Now I'd like to introduce to you Micah Self. Welcome, Micah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we're just going to do a quick rapid fire question here. So can you tell us your name, your major, and your academic standing? So whether you're a freshman, sophomore?
Yeah. So my name is Micah Self. I am a biomedical engineering major, and I am a senior by credit hours, but this is my third year. So I would still have another year left after this one.
Okay, cool.
Great. And so talk to us a little bit about undergraduate research. What have you been up to? How has research been a part of your academic career so far?
So the research that I've done specifically at WSU, I started in the fall last semester. I was taking a class with Dr. Lee, and he mentioned that he had an opening in his lab. So I work under him in the Bio-Integrated Electronic Systems Lab.
Okay.
which is abbreviated Bio-IES lab. So what we do in there a lot is work to develop sensors that would be integrated with the human body, so things that you could comfortably wear on your skin that wouldn't be intrusive or uncomfortable, things that you could wear while you go about your daily life that would help monitor things about your body, usually for people more at high risk. There's some people working for like heart sensors, or the one that I'm working on has to do with monitoring the levels of like bodily chemicals and sweat to make sure that people are healthy through their sweat.
Wow.
I also have done some undergraduate research through my high school. There was an alumnus who works at UAMS, the University of Arkansas, for medicine sciences. So I spent a summer there working in a very different, it was more of a biomechanical orthopedic focus with research. But that's what I've been doing mostly here at WSU for the last couple of semesters.
Wow. So where does this passion come from, for the passion for research and also for your field? What draws you to all of this that you do?
So the passion for research, admittedly, a lot of it has come from the Engineering Plus requirements, if you're familiar with those.
Sure.
For any engineering major, you have to complete 3 of 7 categories that are listed as Engineering Plus credits. So research is one of those. There's service learning, academics like double majoring or getting a minor, things like that. So I thought the research would be a really good option. And there was also, I would like to go to med school if I could. So I plan on applying to med school, and having research experience would be really helpful for that as well.
Absolutely.
What drew me to biomedical engineering in particular, I was an engineering undecided major when I was applying, and I came for the Wallace Invitation Scholarship competition. And at the end of the competition, they split us up into the different engineering majors and took us to tour the labs. So at that point, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I sat at the biomedical table because I thought it sounded cool. I also wasn't particularly drawn to any of the other ones. But on the tour, we went to Dr. Hackinson's lab, Dr. Niels Hackinson. And if you know him, you know that he has muscular dystrophy. Mm-hmm. And he discussed working in his lab. He has force plates. And there was a project they did about developing a mattress that would roll you over in your sleep if you couldn't roll over.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, working with the biomechanics of what muscles and movements that a normal person would do to roll over. And for me, that was really touching because I actually had a sister who had muscular dystrophy, and my mom would wake up in the middle of the night to go roll her over.
Wow! So you could see the direct application of that.
Yeah. So it was just an incredibly personal feeling of this is something that has been a big part of my life, and to be able to do research to help people like this, someone like my sister, I thought would be really cool. So that's when I decided to be a biomedical engineering major.
Wow, what a profound moment for you.
Yeah. I mean, it was very. I think my entire college experience has been rather lucky in many ways, but that was certainly one of them that I think I was just in the right place, and I saw that this is something that I want to do.
Wow.
It's always so nice to see the connection between why people do what they do.
Yes.
Right. So, I'm teaching a class currently, and it's called Lead for Tomorrow, and it's co-taught by several different faculty members across campus, and we have a theme, and so everyone kind of brings their own perspective to the theme. Either way, my perspective was really looking at passion, purpose, sense making, and this whole notion of why do you want to be what you want to be, right? So everyone's, I want to be a doctor, but why?
Right.
What, you could be anything, right? But what is your connection to that? So it's always, to me, really, really profound when I see someone who's able to connect those dots very early.
Yeah.
That's always really interesting to me. So, Micah, when you're working on undergraduate research has many benefits that we've talked about quite a bit throughout this episode. And how do you hope that the research that you're working on and doing impacts the greater Wichita community, whether it be on campus, off campus, or maybe even nationally or globally? How do you hope that what you're doing now has some type of impact?
Yeah, with a lot of biomedical research, I think kind of improving quality of living and life is at the goal of a lot of it. It comes from, we look where are problems and how can we work to improve upon the problems to help people. So for people, one of the big projects they're working on has to do with reading a continuous EKG, and so a standard hospital EKG machine is going to have a lot of leads, a lot of wires. It's a pretty big machine, and so for people at risk of heart failure, that's a lot of equipment and hassle that you can bring into your home, or if you do, it's going to affect your life. So I think what we're hoping to do is make life easier for people, and especially people who have underlying health conditions or problems, that we can help them live the easiest healthy life that they can. And so that's a lot of what I hope comes out of it. For the specific Wichita community, I'm not sure how it would directly apply, but that is kind of the goal to me.
I think even within the mindset of education. And so what I mean by that is being able to explain to someone, whether it be a kid, an adult, a person in the community, the impact that this research could have. And I think oftentimes that it's normal to you because this is the world in which you live in, but for someone who doesn't know this, I think of how impactful and how life-changing it would be even just to have that knowledge that you've been able to acquire, and you making it sound really cool to another young kid in middle school or high school, and they're like, oh my goodness, like I could do that. And I think oftentimes it's about taking what we're learning and finding out just how to educate, because being professionals in higher education or having these research experiences, service learning experiences, I think oftentimes when you're deeply connected to it, there's a way for you to passionately explain what you do in the most simple form sometimes. And I think there's power in that piece right there, from my perspective personally. But if you were to take a step back, and I think you used a word that you said that you feel lucky. I think that might have been the word that you used. But if you could take a step back and kind of just look at the experiences that you've had in doing research, how would you say this has impacted your college experience thus far?
I would describe it as lucky. I think that research has been a very telling experience. In my mind, certainly before entering college, research was very sterile in a way, that when I thought about research, it was being in a lab for hours and hours by yourself in a white lab coat in a very sterile environment where you're doing the same thing over and over again, a lot of data analysis and not much else. And there certainly is that portion of it for sure. But through both my research at UAMS and also here, what I think has been the most helpful or eye-opening is that there's people everywhere. people that you work with and people that you can enjoy working with. So for me personally, working in the lab with Dr. Lee, it's just been a really great experience to connect with a faculty member on a deeper level, and that's one thing that I've been really grateful for. It's especially in the last year, it's been pretty tough to connect with people. Everything went online, and so I started working in Dr. Lee's lab right at about the start of last semester. So getting to have a deep professional relationship with Dr. Lee, working in his lab, and that has been super helpful to me. And also meeting a lot of the different people in the lab and seeing what they're doing and what they're passionate about has been pretty eye-opening to me. I think that before college, research wasn't something that I'd want to do. I thought that I would want a more people-centered approach to things. Mm-hmm. Research seemed to be a couple steps back from that. But certainly there's people everywhere, and if you make an effort to connect with them, you can find a lot of meaningful connections doing research with people or helping the patients directly.
What have you learned about yourself in this process? And we've talked a little bit earlier with one of our other guests, Dr. Lewis, specifically about this whole notion of self-reflection. What have you learned about yourself during your time doing your research?
For me, it's been humbling at times. I've learned that I need to ask a lot more questions. I need to admit when I don't know what I'm doing. It can be a bit difficult at times to maybe reach out to my mentor, to Dr. Lee, and say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
I feel like I've kind of come to a dead end, and if we could have a meeting or something like that to discuss what our goals are, what the direction of the research is, that would be helpful. So for me, what I've learned is to be more open, communicate more. I think that I have a tendency, and I don't want to generalize all engineers, but I think a lot of engineers and engineering majors have a tendency to kind of buckle down and say, well, I can do this if I just really try hard. If I do what I think I should do, it'll be okay. When really it's okay for me to take a step back and say, I don't know what I'm doing right now, and I could really use some input, some advice. And that's why the professors are there, and that's why they put a big emphasis on having student research is to help us. So by me not asking questions, I would kind of be negating a lot of the purpose of what they're doing.
Right.
So yeah, it's been a pretty helpful experience to me to be more open, communicate more, and admit when I don't know what I'm doing.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because we were talking earlier about how research and service learning, those practices allow a student and a faculty member to have such a different relationship than you would see in a classroom. And I feel like you talking and describing your relationship with Dr. Lee speaks to that point exactly, that, arguably, at least from what I'm hearing you say, you would look at Dr. Lee as more of a mentor, right?
Absolutely.
A professor. Is there anyone else beyond Dr. Lee that you feel like has been particularly influential, or that you kind of come to know or work with during your research journey, either on campus or off?
Not particularly in my research journey. I mean, there have been a lot of other students. So I'm an undergraduate, obviously. And there have been a couple master's students in the lab who have also been really helpful. I can ask them what their plans are, what it was like graduating, getting their degree. So that's been really helpful as well.
Yeah, it's funny that that you were saying that you weren't interested in research because you wanted to do something that was more to do with people. Mm-hmm. And here you are, you're learning just how much people are a part of all of that.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's great. So one more question we'd like to ask you is, for somebody, excuse me, for somebody who is wanting to get into some form of research, maybe they have a specific idea that they're wanting to research, or maybe they don't and they just kind of want to get involved in their industry somewhere. You mentioned that you were a part of the Wallace Invitational. Beyond that, how would you suggest a student get involved? What avenues would be the best to pursue?
Just asking people, honestly. And I'm sure someone said that at some point. I can remember there's for BME students, there's a seminar they have to take, and you tour all the labs, and they say, if you ever want to do research, just email, just ask out. And as a freshman, I felt so intimidated by all of it.
Sure.
I was like, I don't know any research. I haven't done any college courses or anything. How am I supposed to join a lab? But really, just ask. Just email. If there's a professor that you really like, feel free to email them and ask, hey, I would love to do research working in your lab. And a lot of the times, even if they don't have spots in their lab, they might connect you with a different faculty member, a different professor who may have spots in their lab. If there's something specific that they want to work on, I would say do the same thing. Email any professor, someone ideally who is related to the topic, has knowledge on the subject, and ask them what they think. And a lot of the times, even if they can't answer the question, they'll direct you to someone who can. Yeah. So it really is just stepping out and asking.
Which that cannot be overstated, I don't think.
Absolutely.
It's one of those things where I constantly tell my students, let me know, ask, if you have ideas or if you want to get involved in something. But it can be very intimidating. And even now, I'm 33 years old and I teach, and I still get terrified asking people sometimes. It's just, It's a scary thing. So the more people that we have telling our students it's okay to ask, I think the better. So I appreciate that answer very much.
Of course.
Well, Michael, we definitely want to say thank you for taking your time to hang out with us
Absolutely.
Today, and we appreciate your feedback and insight. So once again, thanks for joining us at the table today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
So all in all today, I really love the conversation that we had, and just seeing how undergraduate research, service learning, how those two worlds really mesh together with the undertone of making the world that we live in better, right?
Absolutely.
Being curious, having high impact, and even with that high impact, we touched on high impact practices, and
Right.
service learning being one of them, undergraduate based research being another. But in addition to those, we have things like our living learning communities on our campus, which is also a high impact practice, studying abroad as well. And so I just want to encourage all the listeners and the students that are out there to take advantage of these high impact practices and really show how what we learn here in academia in your classrooms can really then go far beyond and impact the community in which we serve. Also want to give a huge shout out to Dr. Chelsea Reger Marquette, who is also a faculty service learning fellow with Dr. Lewis, and who was instrumental in being able to impact some of the students on our campus. And I've had the pleasure and honor with working with Chelsea recently with the work that we're doing for the Honors College. So definitely want to give her a big shout out as well.
Absolutely. Well said, Bobby. And thank you again to all of our listeners as well. We appreciate your support. And as always, we would love to hear from you. So please do leave us a comment, or if you have a topic idea, something that you've seen around campus that you think would be cool for a podcast episode, please let us know. We're always looking for new and valuable content. And if you're someone that has been keeping up with us for a while, and you're liking what we're putting out there, just do us a favor and share this podcast with your friends. And just thank you again for tuning in, and have a great day, and join us next time on Let's Talk About It. Bye.
Bye.